the gardens become part of the community. People own them and they are everyone's. And so it really sort of shifts the scales back into balance where people are just feeling totally empowered and realizing that bush of a arugula that's growing in their backyard that came from a pack of seeds is worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars is a really kind of beautiful way to empower people to know that they are worthy and deserving. Then it really changes the whole landscape of the neighborhood, literally and holistically.
Welcome to Voices from the Field. My name is Gabriella Soto-Velez, and I'm a Sustainable Ag Specialist here at NCAT. In this episode, I'm speaking with Asha Walker, founder and CEO of Health in the Hood, a powerful grassroots organization working to bridge the gap between food access and community health in underserved neighborhoods across Miami. We dive into how Health in the Hood is transforming vacant lots into thriving urban farms, providing fresh produce, nutrition education, and wellness programs right where they're needed the most. Asha shares her journey, the challenges of food apartheid, and how growing food can be a tool for healing, empowerment, and equity. This is a conversation about impact, innovation, and the deep connection between food and justice. Let's get into it. So thank you so much, Asha, for being here. And I'd love to give you the floor to introduce yourself and your background before we dive into what you're doing with Health in the Hood.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. This is really such an incredible space to highlight and celebrate women in agriculture. And I can't think of a more pertinent time to do it. So pumped to be here. I'm Asha Walker. I am the CEO and founder of Health in the Hood. We are an urban farming not-for-profit based in South Florida. And for the last 11 years, today is actually our 11-year anniversary. How timely. We have been growing all types of vegetables in urban settings. So we do raised beds and we are transforming communities. We are helping empower communities to develop healthier habits because in this space, we all know food connects us at our roots. And so we are really building roots in communities. We're nourishing communities. We're harvesting food. And it's just this very organic process that brings people together. And we have found this model really lends itself to also educating folks on nutrition and fitness and movement and holistic health. And so it's really cracked open a whole world that for the last 11 years, we've been navigating and creating and building healthier communities through urban farming. We also do a lot of food distribution as well as part of our model. That's really kind of grown, but I'm sure we have time to dive into all the nitty gritty soon, but that's really the basis of our programming.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really love the word holistic, and it seems like you take that word quite literally when you, with your approach with your organization. But Before we get too into it, I would love to know, what is the landscape of South Florida when it comes to agriculture or the urban communities that you're trying to feed? Why is there a need for the work that you do? And I'm sure that'll definitely segue into how you got started into this space as well.
Yeah. So I think we're so unique in South Florida because we can grow just about year round. I mean, my garden managers will say June, July, August, don't talk to me, but we will really push it to the limits. I mean, we really have almost like a 9-month growing season here. So it's a unique model in that. And for me, the climate, not only is it, perfect for growing food, it's the perfect sort of system that needed to be repaired. It's the perfect sort of plug that is just missing from a food system that, is not unique to South Florida. It's really nationwide that is really broken. And there is access that is completely denied to communities that are usually marginalized, usually communities of color that have sort of been deemed food deserts, which we're also moving away from that language because that's even more sort of divisive. And so these communities are essentially cut off from fresh food because there's not grocery stores. There are lots of sort of mom and pop convenience stores, lots of processed foods available, but you're not going to find a head of kale, some collard greens, or some tomatoes at your grocery store. And in Miami, another piece that's interesting about our climate is how geographically close a neighborhood can be that, has incredibly high access to all sorts of incredible nutritional resources and restaurants and gentrified neighborhoods that butt up right next to communities that are not able to access those very same healthy foods. And so I just thought, well, that is just not right. And we can definitely fill that gap with urban farms. I really come by, honestly, my father is a historian of Black history in Florida. He is I call him the OG, the original gardener. And he started urban farms. I did my community bat mitzvah service project in an urban farm when I was 13. So I just always knew you could go into a neighborhood, you could engage residents and develop community partnerships, and you can really transform communities. And so that's really the basis of how we started and how we grew and how we are still 11 years later pumping out collard greens and kale and radishes and tomatoes and green beans and just uniting communities around this beautiful harvest.
That's so interesting because a lot of the communities that you work with are traditionally agrarian by culture, whether we're talking about the Cubans, the Haitians. They predominantly were farmers in their own countries, and then they come to the United States and they're living in these food deserts where they end up having to go to these bodegas or these convenient shop street processed foods, which have really serious health impacts and health outcomes as well. And I would love to know, how does the work that you do address that? I know you have some really impressive stats, so maybe you could break it down. How do you work with the county to do the work that you do with the gardens? And what does it look like when you're distributing this food or working with the food pantries?
Yeah. So we're really intentional about where we place our gardens. So they're not just in food deserts, sort of urban jungles where you would not expect to see a lot of concrete. You wouldn't expect to see a farm. So we're very deliberate in that. So they really have this sort of stunning street curb appeal. You're looking at what would have been a vacant lot that's just transformed. All the land is donated, which is a really interesting part of our model. So whether it's a municipality, a county, a city, a school, a church, oftentimes religious organizations have access to land, and it's all donated, and we will go in, transform it where it was, trash, crime, drug use. We'll come in and completely transform it into a vibrant vegetable garden. And all the produce is given away for free. We're also really intentional about how we distribute our produce. So none of our farms have fences. So they are completely open to the public. And we get asked a lot about, well, what about, damage and theft? And we are so also intentional about building those community relationships. And food is such a uniting force around it that it's a huge part of our model, is really building that community trust so that the gardens become part of the community. People own them and they are everyone's. And so it really sort of shifts the scales back into balance, where people are just feeling totally empowered and realizing that bush of arugula that's growing in their backyard that came from a pack of seeds is worth hundreds and hundreds of dollars is a really kind of beautiful way to empower people to know that they are worthy and deserving. And it really changes the whole landscape of a neighborhood, literally and holistically.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Makes me feel really excited. And I'm sure that this model could also be applied in different places and at different scales as well. So I'm sure that this has had a huge impact. And while I know when you're creating these projects, it can be really hard to have hard statistics when it comes to the outcomes, but I'm sure you have some anecdotal evidence of health outcomes or changes in violent crime rates or things like that in your community. I'd love if you could share the impact that you've seen in some of these different gardens and areas that you work in.
Yeah. It's incredibly transformative. And we have seen it in the last, over a decade of work. Communities, they literally become healthier. So it's this really simple light switch. When a kid plants a green bean, he feels like he owns that green bean forever. And he has this immediate connection to where his food comes from. And so we get a lot of repeat offenders, right? So people come to the garden for the first time and they're hooked. So that for us is always an anecdotal sort of stat that people, they're in the garden once and they feel like it's a part of their community and they feel pride. So that return customer, if you will, is really a big part of our anecdotal impact. And we have just countless stories of folks who have had chronic illnesses that they have cured, that they have gotten off of medications because they have access to fresh food. And, to your point, where there are these, incredibly deeply rooted cultures and traditions in Little Haiti, in the Latin American cultures that really get unearthed when you're able to grow the teas and the herbs and the spices that, so powerfully healing. And so when people have access to that, it shifts their entire health profile. So we have countless stories of people getting off of medications. And then we have incredible stats of just hundreds and thousands of pounds of food that we've distributed in the last 11 years. So it was, it's really been quite a journey.
So I know that you had a really huge impact on your communities during the COVID-19 pandemic, where you were working with the community to hand out food when their food was scarce and when times were in duress. And so I would love if you could explain how your work shifted during that time. And in the aspect of health, how is your work shifting now?
So when the pandemic hit, we were about maybe 6 years into operations, and we really had a nice flow. We had about 5 beautiful farms, a great team. And then this incredible global pandemic happened that shifted everything. And we were already in the food security space. So it was a unique thing for us because where other businesses were shutting down and closing their doors, we exponentially grew. We did it outdoors. It was a lot of logistics to navigate. But we developed a drive-through pantry. We partnered with local food banks. We planted a lot more food. We made sure we had a lot of our food growing so we could contribute as well. But we worked with a lot of different corporate partners, so World Central Kitchen and Ford. We used driverless vehicles to deliver food to seniors for World Central. I mean, it was really an incredible logistical feat that so many partners came together, but with food at the base of it. So it was an incredible experience, able to provide support for so many families. At the height of the pandemic, we were feeding about 1,000 families a week. And for us, we had always been in the wellness space. So for us, the gardens are sort of our living classroom. So when you teach a kid how to harvest a radish, there's this organic learning experience that happens that just kind of continues and gets built upon because they're living right next to these farms. But the pandemic opened us up to a whole new audience of people who were either already experiencing food insecurity, but are now, were now even in more duress and needed more additional support and resources. So it brought us a whole new audience, which was, not for a great reason, but it ended up being a great way to introduce more people to our practices, our holistic, our whole person health philosophies. So I think we were able to make a pretty exponential impact, not just in the food we distributed during the pandemic, but in the amount of people we were able to reach with our model.
That's so cool. So speaking about the reach that you are having now and the holistic approach, I know that you are creating an app, or you already have an app that's available for communities to use, and that really does integrate nutrition and wellness and the physical aspect of movement. Can you explain a little bit what that is, how it works, and what are some of the benefits that you've seen?
Yeah. So it's, once the health bug bites you, you get it for life. And I come by it honestly. I used to watch my mom doing Jane Fonda workouts as a kid. So I really have always known about the power of thinking about your health holistically. And actually it was right during the pandemic when so many things were shifting and changing. I got my holistic health coaching certification. It just felt like the right time. We were building out all these new programs and reaching so many more people. I said, let me just think about how I can maybe start to reach other people and an even larger platform. And how do we weave these two together? And it took about 3 years of development, but I launched in late 2024, I launched my holistic health app, Cured. And it's essentially a wellness switchboard. It's over 70 modules that are based around food, movement, and longevity practices. And the idea is, similar to the garden, we can grow the food for you, but if you don't inherently know it and have your own sort of compass and navigation tools for it, then we're only doing half the battle. So I really built the app to really empower people to become our own health coaches, our own healers, our own cure. And it's really, it's been so beautiful to see how the two have been supporting each other. Health in the Hood is Cured is really an extension of Health in the Hood. And it's just been an incredible resource just to be able to share with our families and with a larger audience and network. So it's really the next chapter of our work.
That's so awesome. I'm really into health, and the intersection between agriculture and health somehow wasn't always woven together. And there's a disconnect because you can grow the most beautiful vegetables, but if people don't know where they come from or what they taste like or how to make them delicious, then it doesn't really matter. So creating that education, the educational piece to show people the benefits and how to prepare them, I think is so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely a missed opportunity if we didn't also bundle those things together, because they really are, they go hand in hand. I love that you said that. I just shared my food philosophy, and it drills down to that food has been left out of the conversation when it comes to health and wellness for so long. And I'm so happy to see that we are waking up now and that agriculture is finally getting the sort of respect that it needs. It's such a, there's so many elements to it, and we can really get back to our roots. That's really, for me, what it always gets back to, is getting back to our roots. And I'm always promoting local agriculture wherever we can. That's such a big part of the puzzle. We will always need industrial agriculture, no question. There's just too many of us, but we don't focus enough on local agriculture. And so I'm so proud that we get to contribute to that on our small scale at Health in the Hood with our, 8 farms. But if we can keep spreading that ripple effect of empowering people to buy local, grow local, support your local farmers, get into your local CSA, that's just how we really close the gap. That's how we take our power back.
Definitely. I'm wondering, what do you envision now for Health in the Hood? Are you wanting to expand it, or is there anything else that you're trying to address now that you've already solved to some level some of the issues that were within those communities? What is the next step or the next move?
Yeah. So when I wrote our first Jerry Maguire manifesto 11 years ago, I had always envisioned Health in the Hood being a national model. And so that's really our huge goal, is to have a template that we've now perfected in South Florida that we can then give to every food insecure community. Where, a partnership like this is amazing. We can include in our growing guide, growing in different climates, different temperatures, vertical farming, hydroponics, microgreens, so many interesting ways to do quadrant growing. So that's the big, big dream. But in the meantime, we are actually launching a capital campaign right now for a physical space. We kind of, our gardens are our offices. They're our living classrooms. That we've reached a point where we are feeding and serving so many people that without a physical, we're calling it the Health in the Hood hub, that without our hub, we're missing out, and we're not serving as many people, and we're not serving people with the sort of dignity that we would like to be. So when we launched our food distribution model, it was in response to COVID. It was an emergency. We couldn't be inside. We were unloading pallets of food on the street from trucks. And if we didn't give it all out in the same day, it was a logistical nightmare. And so having that space, and that's still how we're operating. We've certainly gotten to be a more well-oiled machine over the last 5 years, but we're still, missing opportunity to provide really beautiful, user's choice experiences where people can really, feel like their access is just the same as a non-food insecure community, or that they are not food insecure communities anymore. That's really our goal. And then to replicate that hub across the country.
That's really powerful, because personally and within my career, I've had the opportunity to travel a lot within the United States. So even in the northern climates where there isn't, it's not the fruit basket of the United States like Florida is, for example, but there are so many abandoned buildings, and the infrastructure in a lot of these neighborhoods is crumbling. And so to revitalize some of those buildings for potentially indoor agriculture where you could feed people throughout the winter is a really interesting model that I myself have been thinking a lot of as I pass through these neighborhoods. And I'm like, we could really be using all of these buildings. Instead of creating more buildings, we could use the existing infrastructure that we have to be able to create more health in the hoods.
Right. And that's the beauty of it, that we're waking up to that people are looking at a building and a vacant, space, and we're thinking, well, that could be growing a whole lot of food, or that rooftop. I just saw a rooftop garden at a hospital in Boston. It's like, okay, we are waking up, because people who are sick and who need healing don't need processed food. They need fresh living food to fuel them and to heal them. And so I love the fact that you're looking at buildings that way as an agriculture, maven, that you look at it that way is really very hopeful. Feels good.
Yeah, definitely. It's really beautiful to connect with like-minded people with these podcasts or within the world itself. It really is inspiring to me as well.
And I think, one thing that I always love to just drill home is that eating healthy is a right. It's not a privilege. So, the more we can share that message, it really, I think, resonates and helps to shift those scales back into balance. And we think about, that having access to nutrient-dense food should not be for a few people. It should be for everyone. It is our innate right. So I think that's an important one.
Thank you. That's really powerful. That really ignites me as well. I find it so strange that we have to pay more for everything that is healthy and natural, whether that's organic cotton clothing or just healthful food, going back to nature somehow.
Backward.
Yeah, it's so expensive to go back to nature and back to the way that things were meant to be. Well, thank you so much, Asha. This was a super informative discussion, and I think it probably inspired many people to get involved in their community gardens or in their local food team. But I'm sure our viewers would love to know, how can they get involved with Health in the Hood?
Yeah, so we have a whole bunch of ways to get involved. Volunteers are always welcome. We have regular volunteer days on Wednesdays in our farms. You can get all the details on our Instagram at Health in the Hood. You can check out our website, healthinthehood.org. And we're always looking for partnerships. So corporate sponsorships, foundation partnerships. It takes a lot of dollars to keep our gardens growing and our team supported and all of the incredible programs that we are able to bring to light. And so as a not-for-profit, it's really, really important for us to always keep those channels open. So that's really important as well. And then just following and sharing our story. That's huge. So the more people that understand and know that hunger and poverty is not the only food access issue, that there are folks that can access food, but it's just not fresh and it's giving them chronic diseases, is a really important space too. So to be able to share that with your community is huge. So I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. I will link all of the information that you provide in the show notes, so everybody knows where to find you. But thank you again for sharing the story and for sharing your time with me. I think it was a really beautiful and productive conversation.
Yay! I hope so.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Additional information about this episode and related resources can be found at attra.incat.org. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Voices from the Field wherever you get your podcasts. ATTRA, Voices from the Field, is produced by the National Center for Appropriate Technology, headquartered in Butte, Montana. It's supported by the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service as part of NCAT's ATTRA Sustainable Agriculture Program. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this recording are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect